going to go ahead and get started with the talk. I'm going to hit record and I'll introduce Dr. Clason. So Dr. Clason is an academic specialist in the Office of the Provost and an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Administration at Michigan State University. He teaches classes on educational research, educational program planning and evaluation, leadership in K-12 and higher education contexts, and first-year seminars. Dr. Clason works primarily on first-year student success initiatives, which include curriculum development, evaluation and assessment, and instructor development for credit-bearing first-year experiences. He holds bachelor's and master's degrees from Cornerstone University and a doctorate in higher education administration from MSU. So go ahead, Dr. Clason.
Great, thanks, Arden. Hey, thanks everyone who's here live with us, and everyone, of course, joining via the recording. I'm so glad for the opportunity to share the work that I do, along with my colleagues do, really in the name of promoting student success at Michigan State University. So let me start here by just sharing my screen. So hang with me for just a second. Okay. There we go. Okay, I am looking at you, Shane. Can you see my screen clearly? Yeah? Okay, fantastic. Great. So I've just kind of very generically titled this MSU Student Persistence in Graduation Research. Really just kind of a recognition that, that this fits in the broader scheme of research at MSU on persistence in graduation. I wanted to start first by going here to the MSU raise. So I pulled this from the RSO and have had this in mind in preparing this presentation. Just understanding what you all are about and what you're hoping to gain from this experience. I think part of the payoff, hopefully for you, for attending this is that you'll just get a better feel for how research is done and some nuanced ways to approach research. And of course, hopefully you see yourself, you see some possibilities. We're going to head here in the time ahead. And of course, we'll finish with some Q&A, and hopefully some things that are raised during the presentation will spark some questions for you. So if that's the case, by all means, just go ahead and jot those down or jot them in the chat, and I'll come to them when we're in the chat. If you don't mind, Arden and Shane and others, if you see that there's something in the chat, or if it's helpful to interrupt, then by all means, just jump right in and interrupt. And let me know if there's something that we need to attend to. So I'm going to start here first with giving you kind of two concepts to reintroduce to you, or to introduce to you if it's the first time, these concepts of action research and research to practice. These are essential to the work that my colleagues and I do. And then I'd like to frame up for you the research problem in some very real ways. So starting with first putting in the national context, but then drilling it right down to the work that we're doing and the research study that I'm going to share with you. Then I'll talk a little bit about the action. So if you haven't picked up already, we do action research, which means there's action and then there's research also. And so I want to share a little bit about that action and then get right into some of the details of our matched cohort study related to that. So first, a couple of concepts to hang on to as we start to think about this. First of all, we're doing what's called action research. And this is where you really bring together attempts at addressing a problem or addressing some complex situations. So bringing that together along with data collection and inquiry, and doing it in an iterative process. So that is, hey, there's a problem. We're going to take steps to try to address that problem, but we're not just going to stop there. We're going to actually do research on our attempts to address those problems. And then based upon our findings, the insights that we draw from it, then we'll review and revise those attempts or those action steps, and we'll try again. And after that attempt, then we're going to do some more research, more data collection, more inquiry, maybe expand that inquiry, see what insights we can gain, and then review and revise and do it again. So that's action research, and that definitely characterizes the work that my colleagues and I do. So just to kind of put some reality to it, and to see how that works out specifically for what we work on. This first thing, MSU intends to graduate all admitted students. So when we admit students, we admit between 8,000 and 8,500 first-time college students each year. And when we admit those about 8,000 students, we expect that all 8,000 of them can graduate. And so we intend to graduate everyone that we admit. We do not expect that we're admitting students who are not capable of graduating. And we expect that we are an institution who's capable of addressing the needs that students have such that they can graduate from MSU. However, not all admitted students graduate from MSU. And of course, among those who don't graduate from MSU, there are some who opt out for good reasons. So there are life decisions that take them in other directions, new opportunities, new discoveries about themselves that take them in other directions, and that's fantastic. Do we intend to graduate those students? Well, no, of course, we want them to go on to pursue those things that are in their own best interest, right? However, there are some students, and really a large number of students, who encounter problems that prevent them from graduating, right? And so as a result, then MSU attempts to identify and address those problems that those students experience that prevent them from graduating. Then we study those attempts. We go through the process of making sense of those studies. And then after drawing insights from that, then we revise our attempts using those insights. So we revise our attempts at addressing those problems that students have encountered that prevent them from graduating from Michigan State University. Okay, so hold on to that, action research. That's a part that characterizes the work that my colleagues and I do. Second thing to hold on to here is research to practice. So I'm gonna ask for a little bit of participation here. Maybe you didn't realize that you signed up for that, but indeed you did. You signed up for a little bit of participation. So on average, how long do you think it takes for clinical medical research to be fully integrated into everyday practice? How long do you think? Jump in the chat here. So I've pulled up the chat on my other screen here, and I'm asking you to lend your guess here. If you would guess, how long do you think it takes for clinical medical research? So there's clinical medical research that has come to this conclusion, like, hey, here is something that can promote the health and healing of people in society. How long on average does it take that research to get fully integrated into everyday practice? So that's integrated into hospitals and doctors' offices and so forth. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of scan through here. I see 3 to 4 years, 5 years, 1 to 2, 3, 2+. 10 years, oh goodness, someone says 10 years, 6.5 years, 6.5, not 6.25, not 6.75, 6.5 years, or 4 to 5 years. Okay, these are great guesses. However, 17 years, wow, maybe 10 years just wasn't enough, right? 17 years to get from coming to understand something to actually bringing it into practice, to actually integrating it into, in this case, into the medical field. So this is a phenomenon that we're well aware of, and we know that there is this problem of making that transition from learning something from our research and getting it integrated into everyday life in ways that benefit society. So at MSU, my colleagues and I, the work that we do, we are very intentional about trying to shape those attempts that we make, with the insights that come from existing research. So when we start some sort of program to address, in this case, persistence, academic achievement, graduation, then it's not, hey, let's take a long weekend and do a retreat, and we'll come up with these fantastic ideas, and then we'll implement it, and next year this is what we'll have students do. No, we're going to go first to the research, because we recognize that there are a lot of insights from the research that are relevant to the problems that we're trying to address. And we're going to try to glean as much as we can from that research to shape the program, to shape our attempts at addressing the problems that we see students encountering at Michigan State University. Okay, so that's the second thing to hold on to, is research to practice. That characterizes, or we hope that characterizes the work that my colleagues and I do. So I want to shift a little bit now and talk about our research problem. I'm going to just kind of, again, kind of scope out a little bit and just say, first, not all admitted college students graduate, right? I have a question for you. And again, this is one of those opportunities to participate. Here's a poll for you. My question is, what was the national average 6-year graduation rate among students who began a bachelor's degree at 4-year degree granting institutions in the fall 2012? So let me unpack that a little bit. So we're talking about students who started in the fall of 2012, okay? And when we look at graduation rates nationally, we tend to talk about them in terms of 150%. So a 4-year degree granting institution, we look at 150% time, which would be 6 years. So after 6 years, how many of those students who started in 2012 actually graduated with a bachelor's degree? So I'm going to launch this poll here and ask you to venture your guess. Would you say that it's a very dramatically low 62%? It's a 72%. That would be, nearly 3 out of 4 students graduating. Is it more like 82%, 92, 96? What would you say? Okay, so I am going to, it looks like maybe there's one more person to respond. I'll give another second. Maybe that person's participating on the phone, that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll here and just show you the poll results. So it looks like, according to your guesses here, 3 folks said 62%, 5 said 72%, and 2 said 82%. No one says 96. No one says 92. Okay, in truth, the national average for the 2012 cohort was 62%. So think about that, 62%. We're not even quite at 2/3, right? And so, man, to think that out of every 3 students, 2 of them graduate, there's 1 that doesn't. Whew, it seems like there are some problems there that need to be addressed, right? Okay, let me close this poll here and move forward here. So then, what about at MSU? So if that's the national average, what do you think is the numbers look like at MSU? Now MSU, of course, let me just make sure that I'm contextualizing this right. MSU is no slouch institution. We are a leading research institution in the United States of America, and many of our programs are leading the nation, leading the world, right? So, so where do we fit among institutions with our graduation rate for that same cohort, the fall 2012 cohort? So I've launched the poll. What would you say? 60%, 80%, 90%? Anybody at 96? Anybody? Oh, some folks are saying 70. Oh, no. Is it possible that we're below? Is it possible that we're at 60%? Okay, here, I'll end the poll here and share these results. Okay, so it looks like most of you said 80%, and in fact, that's the case, 80%. Our graduation rate hit 80% for that fall 2012 cohort, which is fantastic. I think we have been as high as 82%, which, I'm sorry, we've been close to 82%. We have aspired to get to 82% and of course, continue moving forward. So these are the types of things that ultimately our research at MSU is trying to address. We're trying to address the persistence in graduation rates and to raise that graduation rate among admitted students at MSU. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a couple of resources. I'm going to, let me see here. Let me see if I can share them on my screen, but I'm also going to drop them in the chat. Let's see here. Okay, I'm looking at Arden. Arden, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see a smaller version of your presentation.
Oh, you see a smaller version of my presentation?
Yes. It's just a PowerPoint window.
Say that again?
It's a PowerPoint window against your desktop background.
Thank you. Thank you, Arden, for letting me know. Let's see here, desktop. One. There we go. Okay. Can you see my this webpage, this iPad's webpage? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You would think this is my first time on Zoom. It's been like a year that we've all been on Zoom, and yet, okay. Thanks for your patience with me here. Okay, so this is the integrated post-secondary education data system, so let me drop this link into the chat, and that way there you can pull it up if you'd like. On here you can see that basically what this does is this pulls together this is the National Center for Education Statistics, and this pulls together the data from US institutions. So there's a lot available here, and if you have interest in starting to dig into this or taking a look at some trends, or you can see there that there's a look up an institution. You can look up a specific institution. If you want to see how Michigan State University is doing, or let's say your friend from high school, went off to another university, go check to see how that university is doing and what things look like there. So that's one resource I want to introduce to you. A simplified resource that I have found helpful, just kind of as a quick resource, and something very interesting to me, is this US Department of Education College Scorecard. So let's take a look, just as an example, let's take a look at Michigan State University. Right. Okay, so here's MSU. And notice here, so there's some caveats in here, some things that you want to read, some of these more information tabs here. But it shows things like salary after completing the degree, the average annual cost among those who receive federal financial aid. Here's graduation and retention right here. So here's that 80% graduation. Here's something I'm going to come back to at another time. Notice here, students who return after their first year, that's at 91%, right? So that's Michigan State University. What's another university, just for comparison, what's another university that we could look up and take a look at their stats? Somebody chime in maybe on the chat or just come on mic, if you could come on mic. Okay, I see a University of Michigan. Let's take a look at University of Michigan. If you are a Michigan native, oftentimes what what Michigan natives don't realize is that University of Michigan is a top tier university, very selective in their admissions. So a couple of things that we can look at their graduation rate. Wow, 92%. Their average annual cost among federal financial aid recipients was $16,000, right? That's $2,000 below what MSU was. Their graduation and retention, 97% return after their first year, right? Here's some other things. My son is 17 and has just finished his college applications. And so I directed him here often to check out various institutions he was interested in. You can take a look at their test scores, right? So first of all, their acceptance rate, they're at a 23% acceptance rate. This is the middle two quartiles of scores for the SAT. Right? So the middle two quartiles. So that means of 100% of students, 25%, in this case, the critical reading, 25% scored at or above 730 on the SAT for critical reading. 25% scored at or below 660 for critical reading. But those middle two quartiles scored between 660 and 730, right? So look at this. For math, 670 to 780 for the middle two quartiles with ACT scores of 30 to 34, right? So here's a way that you can take a look at some of the research, some of the statistics on various institutions. And the hope here, of course, was that it would provide students and families the ability to compare apples to apples on some important characteristics of colleges. Let's take a look at one other one. Let's take a look at Eastern Michigan University, which is not very far from Michigan State University. So let's take a look at, so their graduation rate is at 51%, right? Their average annual cost lower, $15,394, so lower than University of Michigan being lower than Michigan State University. Their graduation and retention, so their first year student, 72% return after the first year. And something that I suggest is a part of this whole puzzle is take a look at their SAT scores for their incoming students. Their middle two quartiles were between 450 and 590, right? And their ACT scores between 15 and 23. So things to consider, and certainly some very intriguing research questions, I think, present themselves here. Okay, so let me scoot back to a presentation here. And okay, Jeremy, I'm looking at you. Can you see my screen clearly? Yep, looks good. Okay, great. Okay, thanks. So, okay, let's see here. Okay, so a couple resources there. So then let's get right to our research problem, right? So not all admitted college students graduate. Not all MSU students graduate. And in fact, this attrition begins their first semester. So we saw that MSU has a very impressive, I would argue a very impressive first year persistence rate of 91%. But when we dig a little bit deeper, we see that there are problems that present themselves already in the first semester, in that first year. Okay, so generally speaking, the action, what we're trying to address is what can MSU do to help students make a successful transition from high school to college and get on a path to graduation. So as we examined the kind of the field of the research related to these things, one thing that we landed upon was first year seminars. So why first year seminars? Why would we dig into this research on first year seminars, and why would we do it? Well, we found that at MSU, the challenges in the transition to college foreshadow achievement gaps at MSU. That is, that there are achievement gaps. There are differences between groups of students, these gaps that seem to have only to do with certain characteristics. And so there are these achievement gaps. And there's this powerful correlation between end of first semester probation and overall graduation rates. So only about a third of students at MSU who are on probation at the end of their first semester eventually graduate from MSU. Whew. All right, so that means that there's something going on because we admitted those students, we expected that they could graduate from MSU, and after their first semester, we're already seeing indicators that suggest that they're not going to graduate. And as we look longitudinally, we see, yeah, typically that's how it tends to sort out with graduation. Okay, here are some of the details. First semester probation rates for Latinx and Black African American students, students who receive Pell, and first generation students are consistently and considerably higher than the university average. So we have this university average, but then if we just drill down on these different student groups, we find that for these students, they're higher. And this is first semester probation rates, but then we find that these outcomes generally track along with 6-year graduation outcomes. That is, that there are higher probation rates and then lower 6-year graduation rates, right, for these various groups of students. Okay, so we dug into the first year seminars to say, all right, how can we start to address some of these issues? So we have certain populations of students that we know that there are problems presented at MSU that prevent them from graduating, but there are students who don't necessarily cleanly fit into these various categories that also we see they're not graduating from MSU, and what can we do about it? So we looked at the first year seminars. There are 5 different types of first year seminars. There's these academic focused ones. There are discipline linked ones. So this is maybe an introduction to a major. There are these basic study skills where you're trying to help students develop those basic academic skills that they need for college. But then there are also these extended orientation seminars. That's the type of seminar that we have. So just not to spoil it on the next slide, but indeed, this is where we're trying to really help that student to make that transition from high school to college successfully, right? There's a 5th type of first year seminar, and that's a hybrid. That's where you're putting together 2 or more of these focus areas. Okay, so then we started to look at the research to say, all right, what does the research say about setting up effective first year seminars? And here's what we found. The research suggests that, first of all, we should take that extended orientation model rather than the academic or the hybrid or any of the others if we're trying to address persistence, academic achievement, and graduation. Second, that these should be taught by faculty or administrative staff and not undergraduate or graduate students. In some cases, you have graduate students as professors in other institutions. In some cases, you have undergraduate learning assistants or undergraduate instructors. And so the research suggests, nope, those are not going to be helpful in getting the outcomes that you're seeking. Also, the research suggests that we should target all first year students rather than just underprepared students, right? So if a student comes in with a low, let's say, writing proficiency or math proficiency, don't just target those students, target all first year students. These courses should be standalone. They should be credit bearing. They should have a grade assigned to them rather than pass, no pass, or pass fail. And they shouldn't be linked to a learning community. They should be a standalone regular class. And then for instructors, there needs to be robust training provided for those instructors. And then these first year seminars should really be connected to other efforts, other programs to support students in the transition. Okay, so that's the research. That's the research to practice piece that we looked at. Then we developed UGS 110 first year seminar. And when we did that, then again, we implemented those insights from the research. So we set up clearly defined learning outcomes that are shared across all sections of UGS, the UGS 110 course. Instructors are well prepared and organized. We do that through a workshop series that takes place in the spring and the summer as they prepare for the fall. For the course itself, we recognize that this transition from high school to college, sometimes you actually need to challenge students. You need to challenge them to step up to this now elevated level of an academic experience. We also recognize in the research, which the research suggests, is that there also needs to be certain support. So you can't coddle students, and at the same time, you have to recognize that sometimes there needs to be some support for students amidst what is a difficult transition. There's some basics to the course, right? Some basics from the research on how to conduct a course effectively. There needs to be timely grading, feedback, follow-up. When there's something that comes up as a result of an assignment, actually do follow up. Don't just expect, well, I gave you feedback and I gave you a grade, that's it. No, something surfaced there, let's address it. There's this emphasis on personalized feedback that really intends to support the student. There are small class sizes, which again, as MSU students, you recognize that when you started at MSU, likely you were in a lot of classes with 100 to 500 of your closest classmates, right? So you went from high school where maybe you had 15, 20, maybe as many as 30 or 35 students in a class, to college where now suddenly you have 100 to 500 you're lost in the crowd. So part of the design of the course is to help them to make that transition from high school to college by providing one of those high school-like experiences of a small class size. And then finally and importantly, assessment of learning. One of the pillars of this UGS 110 seminar is that we do robust assessment of learning and program assessment. And when I talk about program assessment, that's where we're looking at, okay, students might have learned the outcomes, they might have achieved the learning outcomes for the course, but did achieving those outcomes actually lead to persistence and academic achievement? Okay, I'm gonna skim through here the outcomes for UGS 110, just to give you a sense of the types of things that are covered in this seminar. And then I want to get right into the cohort study. So you can notice here that there are some basics that you would expect that would be a part of an extended orientation. That's things like introducing students to those academic resources that exist at MSU, introducing them to some things like registered student organizations that will help them socially while they're in college. But part of this transition from high school to college is about personality and identity and coming to know yourself as an independent part of society. Part of this is, leaving home. So we can't just say, well, we need to introduce students to the Writing Center and the Math Learning Center. No, we need to help them to make sense of this transition where they have literally left their home and their family and now are living independently. They're now living in a context in which they're starting to recognize these various identities that they have or could have, and how they are connected to power and privilege, and how cultures interact with each other, especially at a large, diverse place like Michigan State University. This is a bit of culture shock for students. That maybe for the first time, they're starting to engage in dialogue about difficult issues that are real life. And there needs to be some support or some development to help students to engage those things in healthy ways. There's the basics of just making your way around MSU, and the basics of now trying to manage your time, manage your own health and the stress that comes with being a college student. And of course, our 8th outcome here has to do with really honing on where am I headed, what career, what major. Okay, so these are the outcomes that are standard across the UGS 110 sections of the course. Just a brief comment on instructor development. So we spend a lot, the research says, do a lot to support instructors so that they are well equipped to support students. So we spend a lot of our resources, our energy on instructor development, and instructors spend a lot of time in instructor development, the instructor development workshop series. Okay, so now to the numbers. So we launched UGS 110 in fall 2017. There were 12 sections, and of those 12 sections, we had 190 students. In fall 2018, we ramped that up to 21 sections for a total of 311 students. And in fall 2019, we had a combined 24 sections for a total of 379 students. So we ran our matched cohort study on each of these. And for fall 2017, we found no statistical significance. For fall 2018, we found no statistical significance. That is, we couldn't tell that participation in this course actually made a difference for students. Part of it might actually have to do with the fact that we had low numbers. That 190 is a low number for the type of study that we're doing. Okay, so the type of study. We use a matched cohort study. So this is where we take each student who participated in the first year seminar, the UGS 110 first year seminar, and we match them to another student who is an incoming, the FTIAC, FTIAC is first time in any college. So we matched all first time in any college students to another student who did not complete UGS 110. Okay, so we matched them. What do we match them on? Well, we matched them exactly on variables like gender, race, ethnicity, their residency, that is, are you in-state, out-of-state, or international student, Pell Grant status, which has to do with financial need, first generation status, are you a first time in your family college student, and then whether they were in an open enrollment or limited enrollment declared major. So we matched students one for one. Every student who was in UGS 110 found a match at MSU who did not participate in UGS 110. So then we did these cohort comparisons, and we looked at things like persistence to the first spring semester. Then we looked at, well, what about persistence to, did you come back that second year, the start of that second year, so second fall semester. We looked, of course, at probation at the end of first semester and probation at the end of second semester. We look at cumulative first semester GPA and cumulative first year GPA. So for the fall 2019 cohort, which some of you might be a part of that cohort, some of you may or may not have participated in UGS 110. I'm going to share now the results with you, but recognize that these are relatively generic. I'm giving you an overview of them, and in part because there are boundaries that you have to put in place when you're doing action research. We can talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A here soon if you'd like. Okay, so here's what we found. 377 students who completed the fall 2019 UGS 110, and we actually had these sections of BUS 101 that were basically UGS 110 but just offered to business students. So they were matched to students who had similar demographic and academic characteristics, but those students they were matched to didn't complete the course. And in comparison to the matched group, these first year seminar students earned higher term GPAs. They were placed on academic probation at the end of their first fall at lower rates. They persisted to the following spring at higher rates, at a higher rate. And they were placed on academic probation at the close of their first spring at lower rates. Okay, so just a quick word about what I have in parentheses there. When we say that they earned higher term GPAs with 95% confidence, that is, we're confident to the degree of 95% that it was the course that made the difference in them getting a higher GPA rather than just chance or some other confounding variable. If you're familiar with research, then you know that the gold standard for confidence is going to be where your p-value is less than 0.001. Right? In other words, that would be a greater than 99.9% confidence. So it's relatively humble to say 95% confidence, and certainly humble to say 90% confidence. With the type of study that we have, to only have 377 students makes it difficult for us to really push out to, can we see 99% confidence, so a p-value of 0.01. These are the results of our matched cohort study. And of course, as a result of this, we're digging deeper, right? We first of all want to see a higher confidence in these outcomes. These are the types of outcomes that we're hoping for. We want to see a higher confidence rate for that. And in addition, we recognize that this study is not the end all. This doesn't tell us everything that we need to know. So for next steps, we're expanding our inquiry. We're going to take those 3 groups, the fall 17, 18, 19, and do a combined cohort study. So the power, numerically, the power there might actually give us greater insight into how well or how poorly our seminar is doing at helping students to persist and to be academically successful. But we're not just taking a statistical approach to this. We're not just taking a quantitative approach. We're also taking a qualitative approach by expanding our inquiry to include interviews, student interviews, focus groups, and we also have an annual student survey. So then, of course, well, after that, what's next? Well, we review the course and we revise it based upon the insights that we gain from our research. And then we, of course, repeat, do it again. Okay, I have talked a whole lot about this, and hopefully I've given you a good amount of things to think about, and maybe you've come up with some questions. So I'd like to just pause, see, Arden, maybe you could chime in here and let me know where we are for time, and then maybe we could take some Q&A.
Yeah, we can go ahead and start Q&A if anybody has any questions. And then afterwards, I'll be staying around if anybody has questions about the club, just so you know. So yeah, if you have a question, go ahead and, yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay. So when you talk about probation, what does it mean for a student to be on probation? Is that academic or honesty, or what are the types of situations there?
Yeah, let me pull this down here. Yeah, great question, Jeremy. Okay, so when I talk about academic probation, then we're talking about if it's first semester, that means that after the conclusion of their first semester, their cumulative GPA was below 2.0. So that puts a person on academic probation. Some of our research here at MSU suggests that academic probation is really just a kind of an arbitrary mark. That suggests if you have a cumulative GPA below 2.0, that suggests there's some crisis going on there, some academic crisis. However, the outcomes for students who are on academic probation, that is, that their cumulative is below 2.0, are similar to students who have up to about a 2.65 GPA. So if you have a 2.65 GPA at the end of your first semester, that suggests to us that there's a crisis going on there. And in our longitudinal study, we found that students with less than 2.65 GPA at the end of the first semester tend to not graduate, certainly not at the 80% rate or the rates that we hope for. They're lower rates. They're much lower rates. Yeah. Great question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you can say with 95% confidence or 90% confidence that the seminar had an impact on increasing graduation rates and decreasing probation rates, things like that. But like, what is the degree to changed as a result?
Okay, I'm sorry, you kind of froze up there, at least on my screen you did. So that last part, so 95%, 90%, but what is?
Yeah, what is the degree to which those numbers changed?
Yeah, Sai, that is a very insightful question. Yeah, so let me give you a non-answer and an answer. First of all, the non-answer. I'm going to give you a non-answer because these are students who you might be among those students, or these might be some of your classmates. So that's the non-answer. For me to say, well, it was a increase of, the students who didn't participate had an average of 3.0, and the students who did participate had a 3.9. So that's not something that I'll share this evening. But important to the point, so setting that aside, important to the point is we're looking at individual students. And of all the students who participated in the UGS seminar, some of them, their matched member had like a 2.5, let's say, and they had a 2.65. Some of them had, the UGS student had a 3.1 and their matched student had, let's say a 2.5, right? There is a difference in terms of considering, well, for the student who's a 3.0 or above student, there are different dynamics that are taking place there versus the student who's somewhere between 2.0 and 3.0. So that's the first thing. But importantly, what we're looking at, of course, and to your point is, okay, so it was statistically significant difference, but was it substantial? Was it a meaningful difference? And our study shows us that there's more that we need to do in order to see a meaningful difference. So we saw, so I can say, for sure, we saw some students where their matched member had a 2.4 and they had a 2.5. That's great, but that's not really meaningful, right? We need to see more than that. We need to see that they get above the 2.65. We want to see people, at the 2.75 to the 3.0 range. So part of our expanded inquiry and our review and revision is to say, okay, we see that we help students to increase their GPA. We see that that's statistically significant. We're headed in the right direction, but we're not seeing it being meaningful enough. We need it to be meaningful enough to move them out of that danger zone of being below 2.65. Did that satiate your appetite enough, Sai?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have there been any statistical anomalies, whether with just this research or with any of your other previous research that you found particularly interesting? Just anything that maybe didn't result in successful research, but something that you could think of?
So your question is, are there any anomalies that we came across in our research that really kind of throw us for a loop or spark our interest? Yeah, so the first, of course, is when you're looking at a graph and you see the graph suddenly dip or suddenly, jut up, then that's always very jarring. And it's like, wait a second, we've got to figure out what has happened here. Most often when that happens, the issue is that rather than there being, we're looking at 8,500 students, 8,500 students. And so these groups of students that we group them into, they'll oftentimes be 300, 500, 1,000, 3,500, that's the size of groups. But inevitably you have this group where, they jutted down and then they jutted up. We saw this, like 100% improvement. And it turns out that there are only 2 or 3 students in that group. So when we're looking at race, ethnicity, Indigenous Americans, there are not very many Indigenous Americans enrolled at Michigan State University. And so, for one research study that I was working on, I remember, we saw this drop and then up and then drop and then up. And what it was there were 3 students in that cohort. And one of them stepped out and then came back. And then another one stepped out and then came back. So that always kind of throws us for a loop. Yeah, other anomalies. I think some things that we can expect, but it's always a little bit surprising when you see it, is when you do pre-post research with students, especially with incoming students, a lot of times what you're looking for is what is their confidence in their own abilities. And to have them start the semester and their confidence in their own abilities is really high, and then they finish their first semester and their confidence in their abilities is really low, boy, is that can be demoralizing. It feels like, wow, did I just hurt this group of students? I was supposed to help them, and now suddenly their confidence in their own abilities is lower than before they even took the course. But in fact, there's a well-known principle that novices tend to overestimate their abilities, And once they start to get a sense of of the landscape, then their confidence in their own abilities or their own knowledge gets calibrated down to probably reality. And then, of course, as they develop so that they're no longer novices, well, then that confidence starts to go up. So that's something that we do see. Again, it's a bit demoralizing when it comes out, but ultimately we recognize that that principle is likely at play in those situations.
Very cool. Thanks.
Yep.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I am curious, do you have like a way of measuring how seriously students like take their education? Because like I know some kids that like are here in a good part to party and like some for school, and then like a lot of kids that are here like for school.
Yeah. So so I think this is it's not my area of research, but there are certainly those who who have that as a part of their research agenda. I have some colleagues who look at that, and they look at what are called the non-cognitive variables. So if you just Google non-cognitive variable assessment and look at William Sedlacek's work, so Sedlacek is Sedlacek. So if you have students complete the non-cognitive variable assessment, then that gives a pretty good, that can give a pretty good indication of how seriously students are taking their education. Bill Sedlacek's assessment has been implemented at universities across the US and in fact around the world. MSU recently adopted that. There is this adjustment period before you have to kind of calibrate it according to your institution and your students before you can actually start to form some conclusions based upon the research itself. But yeah, there are definitely ways to dial in on how seriously students are taking their college experience. The non-cognitive variable assessment in a lot of places is actually used as a part of the admissions process, as a part of the application process, right? Because you want to get a sense of, are we admitting students who are serious about their education, right? But arguably, if you take a look at a very selective university like Michigan, University of Michigan, where their persistence rates are high, some would argue that, well, when you select among those who have really high SAT scores, when you add complex essay questions to the application process, you're starting to get a sense of who is serious and how serious are they about their college education. Some of course would argue against that, but ultimately I think these are parts of the rationale that hold up selective admissions processes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey Nate, great presentation.
Thanks.
I just have a quick question about I guess you could say, what you're anticipating on how the effect of online education is going to affect graduation rates. I mean, I know it's just such a difficult question to answer, but if you just have any insight or any predictions on how that's going to play out, I'd be curious to hear them.
Yeah. So Nick, you've caught me at a point of pessimism. So let me preface my response with that. I'm not sure who is actually excited about fully online college, at least not for a university that is an in-residence university. I am certainly not among those. I'm not pleased with being fully online, and I do see indications that this is not benefiting students, and it's especially not benefiting incoming students. So think about your experience of actually experiencing independence. You moved into, you moved out of your parents' house. Most folks, for when they start college, they move out of their parents' house. That's a major moment that you've been looking forward to. Many people have been looking forward to for a long time. That didn't happen for this cohort of students, right? Think of the way that you made it through the grind of some of those incoming courses, not because of how intriguing they were, but because your experience was buffered by the fact that you could go to an MSU football game and see MSU play University of Michigan, or you could go to a basketball game, or you could, all the different things that you could do in person that this cohort of students is not doing. And importantly, again, kind of things that are closer to the first year seminars that I work on, think of the fact that these students can't walk into the writing center. They can't walk into the math learning center. They can't walk into social science study sessions, or have, sit down next to a peer-assisted advisor. Those are very tangible experiences that they're not getting. And arguably, I recognize for myself, I work here in my sun porch, and my commute is directly through my dining room, and that commute is not long enough. I find it difficult to get my motivation up. That tactile experience of driving into work, walking into the office, that's meaningful on the fundamental level of who I am. As a student, to walk into a classroom, that's a tactile experience that's fundamental to pushing them into that experience, even though it's Psych 101 and it's a grind, or it's Chem 1 and it's a grind, right? So unfortunately, I think that this is not going to be this isn't going to be better for students, for sure. This is not a better experience for students, and I really hope that we as a society and we at Michigan State University can do things to help to now address a new challenge, a new barrier that not just incoming students, but continuing students are experiencing.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Clason. We really appreciate you being here and presenting to us.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I really just want to say, boy, I think that this organization is fantastic. I really hope that, my presentation, but then the other, all the other presentations and all the other ways that you're engaging research really helps you to find your way into research. And at the very least, part of my emphasis on research to practice is, my hope is that all of us in the MSU community, that we draw upon those rich resources, of those research insights for everything from how to deal with the weeds in your yard, MSU Extension, to, the day in and day out of our work. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.